Have you ever heard about the town where everyone turns into chocolate? What about a town that literally runs on chocolate? Well, if you thought that this was just some strange local legend or a made-up story from some crazy old lady who lived in a gingerbread house, then you'd be dead wrong, because there is actually a real place like that. In fact, it's not even that far away. Milton Hershey opened his famous chocolate factory in the small town of Dairy Church, Pennsylvania. And while at first glance the chocolate factory looked like an ordinary factory, it was actually anything but. Milton had a secret plan to transform the town of Dairy Church into the most extraordinary chocolate-themed town in the whole world. And over the years, he bought up most of the town's buildings and turned them into wacky chocolate-themed attractions for his workers and their families to enjoy. But then, after Milton passed away in 1945, his heirs kept expanding the park with new attractions until eventually it became one of the biggest tourist attractions in all of Pennsylvania. So today, let us step inside and explore what life is like in the town where everyone turns into chocolate. First off, we have to talk about the very start of it all, which is the great Hersheys chocolate factory. The factory itself was built by Milton Hershey, who grew up on a farm in rural Pennsylvania. From an early age, he always dreamed of inventing something that would make him rich. He tried his hand at several different inventions, but none of them really panned out until he discovered that he could make delicious milk chocolate bars. Almost immediately, he opened up a small chocolate shop in Philadelphia. It was called the Lancaster Caramel Company, and since his chocolate was so good, it didn't take long for him to become one of the richest men in the country. But unfortunately, as the years went on, he began to feel empty inside. He knew that there had to be more to life than just making caramel candies, so he started looking for a new project. When he decided to open up a brand new chocolate factory in the small town of Dairy Church. From the outside, the factory looked like your average industrial building, but once you stepped inside, it was like entering another world. All of the walls were painted in bright colors. There were fountains spraying chocolate everywhere, and instead of workers, there were actual kids dressed up like little elves making the chocolates. But despite how magical the chocolate factory seemed, it was actually pretty dark. See, Milton wanted to keep costs down as much as possible, so to attract young workers, he lured them in with promises of a fun work environment, only to have them do grueling 10-hour shifts for extremely low wages. As the years went on, Milton continued to expand the chocolate factory. He hired more and more workers, and soon he needed a place for them to live. So he started buying up all of the houses in town and turning them into wacky chocolate-themed attractions. There was the chocolate house, which looked like a giant bar of chocolate. Then there was the cocoa house, which looked like a giant cup of cocoa. And then there was the carob house, which looked like a giant carob bean. But then he didn't stop there. He also bought up all of the local businesses and turned them into chocolate-themed attractions as well. For example, there was the chocolate bank, which looked like a giant coin. Then there was the cocoa post office, which looked like a giant stamp. And then there was the Carob Hotel, which looked like a giant candy wrapper. It almost felt like you had stepped into another world. But it got even better once you stepped outside, because the entire town was decorated like a chocolate box. There were chocolate fountains spraying from every corner, and the streets were lined with chocolate statues. It truly was like stepping into the Willy Wonka movie. I think there was one big difference. A Willy Wonka was full of magic and mystery. The real Hershey's chocolate factory was actually full of danger. You see, as the years went on, Milton's chocolate empire kept growing and growing. But as his empire grew, so did his paranoia. He started thinking that people were out to get him, and that they would stop at nothing to steal his secret chocolate recipe. So he hired a team of private investigators to follow his workers and make sure that none of them were stealing his recipe. They even went as far as tapping phones and opening mail. If they found any evidence of theft, they would immediately fire the worker and never hire them again. To make matters worse, Hershey was also a huge racist, and he didn't want any non-white people living in his town. So he created a clause in all of his leases that specifically banned African Americans from living in his town. This caused many of the workers to leave, and it also gave Hershey a bad reputation. But despite all of the drama, Hershey's chocolate factory continued to grow, and by 1945, it had become one of the biggest tourist attractions in all of Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, though, that same year, Milton passed away. But before he died, he put his entire estate into a trust fund and named his nephew, Richard H. Horne, as the sole beneficiary. This meant that Richard would inherit the entire chocolate factory as well as the entire town of Dairy Church. At first, Richard wasn't really interested in running the chocolate factory. He had other business interests that he wanted to focus on. But as the years went on, he began to see the potential of the chocolate factory. So he hired a team of engineers to help him modernize the factory and make it more efficient. They installed new machines and updated the building. And by the 1960s, the chocolate factory was making more money than ever before. But Richard didn't stop there. He also wanted to expand the town of Dairy Church. So he started buying up more buildings and turning them into wacky chocolate-themed attractions. For example, he built a miniature golf course that looked like a giant chocolate bar. He also built a Ferris wheel that sprayed chocolate from every corner, and he even built a roller coaster that took you on a wild ride through the chocolate factory. By the 1980s, Dairy Church had become one of the biggest tourist attractions in all of America. Every year, over 1 million visitors came to the town to experience the magic of Hershey's chocolate world. But then tragedy struck in 1984 when Richard H. Horne passed away. When he passed away, his will stated that the chocolate factory and the town of Dairy Church should be turned into a museum. But his heirs fought back and said that this was a bad idea. They argued that the chocolate factory was still a valuable business, and that it should be passed down to the next generation of the family. This led to a huge legal battle that lasted for years. But in the end, the court ruled that the chocolate factory and the town of Dairy Church should be turned into a museum. So in 1987, the Hershey Company opened up to the public. Today, you can visit the town and see all of the wacky chocolate-themed attractions that Hershey's chocolate factory has to offer. You can play mini golf, ride the Ferris wheel, and even go on a roller coaster. But maybe the best part about visiting Hershey's Chocolate World is that you can also tour the actual chocolate factory and see how chocolate is made from start to finish. I know I've spent a lot of time talking about how cool and mysterious the chocolate factory is. But honestly, it's not that interesting. Sure, they make some really good chocolate there, but it's not like they're making gold bars or something. If you want to see what a real chocolate factory looks like, watch this video here. I think what's much more interesting about Hershey's Chocolate World is the town itself. Walking around the town feels like you're in another world. Every building is decorated like a giant chocolate bar, and every corner has a fountain spraying chocolate. It truly is like stepping into a chocolate box. And who knows? Maybe you'll even get a chance to try some of the famous Hershey's chocolate. But before you do, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos.